Brief outlook about who are the early cervical cancers. According to the new WHO figure 2018 classification, it would be from stage 1A1, 1A2, 1B1, 1B2, and of course 1B3 is again a gray zone, and then 2A1. So 2A2 again is a gray zone. So we will be discussing about these which would be our early cervical cancers. So a little look at the new figure staging. So this is a clinico-pathological and includes imaging as well as compared to the previous staging, which was only clinical, because now we know that we are having more and more pathology and imaging side by side. So I think it's very important that we need to learn how to read our images, because otherwise we would be opening up cases and closing them. So lymph node is now again a part of FIGO staging, and stage 1B is divided into 1B1, 1B2 and 1B3. So stromal thinning, that is a very, very important thing which we have to look up on all MRIs before we decide on doing taking a case for surgery. So MRI is very, very important tool to evaluate the parametrium, pelvic nodes as well, and IHC also has become important. And endocervical carcinomas, we need to do some other investigations so that we rule out endometrial cancers which are metastasized to the endocervix, because the treatment would be different. So, and the dual modality of management is to be avoided, as it increases toxicity without any survival benefit. So that we can avoid. Is there a lot of echo or is it fine? So dual modality of management is to be avoided as it increases toxicity. So we need to do a lot of workup before we take a case for surgery, so that we really do not give her any adjuvant treatment after the surgery. So we have to, selection is very, very important. About the size of the disease, about the nodal status has to be done very meticulously. So primary surgery is feasible in stage 1A1 to 2A1 except 1B3. So this we have discussed, and primary chemoradiation for all other stages. Though the principles of surgical management remains the same for squamous cell carcinomas, adenocarcinomas and adenosquamous carcinomas, because we know there has been a lot of changes in the definition and histopathology of the adenocarcinomas, but till now still we do not have any different standards of treatment for that. So radical surgery by gynec oncologist is the preferred treatment modality, as unlike endometrial cancer, where we do allow a general gynecologist to do the surgery in early stages and low risk cases. And lymph node assessment should be performed as the first step of surgical management, and intraoperative assessment of the lymph node status by frozen section is recommended. So once you start, it's better to send them for frozen section, and the standard lymph node staging procedure is systematic pelvic lymphadenopathy, and sentinel node biopsy before pelvic lymphadenectomy can be an option in centers where the method is validated. So a combination of blue dye with radiocolloid or use of endocyanin green alone is the recommended technique, and all sentinel nodes from both sides of the pelvis and or any suspicious lymph nodes should have to be sent for frozen section and then proceed. So the type of radical hysterectomy again, so that's a huge debate. So it has to be based on the pre-operative staging. So the pre-operative staging has to be very, very, very meticulous regarding the size of the disease, where the histological type, the size, and where it is arising from, whether there is vaginal extension or not. If there is vaginal extension, whether it is on the anterior or the posterior, so that you tailor your vaginal margin according to the extension of the disease. So it's so important to assess the vaginal extension before. And in case you know that there is a little extension to the like it is impinging on the stromal ring, so you need to take the margins very clear of it. So ovarian preservation should be offered to premenopausal patients with squamous cell cancers, and of course HPV related adenocarcinomas, because the others have a more chance of ovarian metastasis, and bilateral salpingectomy of course should be considered, because they would prevent ovarian cancers. But young patients with non-HPV related adenocarcinoma should be counseled carefully regarding bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy due to the higher risk of metastasis. So I think you have to see the size of the disease, and sometimes the vaginal extension is missed during your OPD examination. So examination under anesthesia in the OT would be also a better choice before we start and do the surgery. So I think for all practical purposes, most of us are practicing the Querullo-Mollo classification of hysterectomies, and this is there in the book, so we are not going to describe this, but this according to the size of the lesion you can tailor your treatment about which class of hysterectomy you really want to do. So, in stage 1A1 it is basically conization is an acceptable treatment for stage 1A1 and adenocarcinoma of the cervix as well as squamous. Reconization or trachelectomy may be an option if the margins are positive. However, reconization is recommended if the specimen cannot be oriented, fragmented or has diathermy artifact. So, then that is again a indication for a reconization, and conization for cervical cancer is often leads to large or multiple and carries a very high risk of obstetric complications. So, if you are doing it for fertility preservation, I think you should be very careful, because the obstetric outcome would not be good if you are doing a really large cone or a reconization. So, conization should be considered a definitive treatment in stage 1A1, as hysterectomy does not improve the outcome. We have enough evidence for that, but hysterectomy can be considered in women where fertility is not an issue and when patient declines conization, and lymph node staging is not indicated in stage 1A1 LVSI negative patients, and lymph node staging is needed in others in 1A1 with LVSI positive patients. And radical surgical approaches such as radical hysterectomy or parametrectomy represent over treatment for stages 1A1 disease. So, coming to stage 1A2, in patients desirous of fertility without LVSI, conization or simple trachelectomy is adequate. With LVSI, conization, radical trachelectomy has to combine with sentinel lymph node biopsy or systematic pelvic lymph node dissection. However, if the patient is not desirous of fertility, obviously without LVSI it could be a simple hysterectomy, because there are trials which are showing that simple hysterectomy is quite good enough, and with LVSI abdominal type B radical hysterectomy with sentinel lymph node biopsy or a systematic lymphadenectomy. And coming to stage 1B1, so it is actually not very easy to see these cases nowadays, because it is I do not know, the numbers are really going down, and in patient desires of fertility, again radical trachelectomy with sentinel lymph node biopsy or pelvic lymph node dissection, and this radical trachelectomy can be either abdominal, vaginal or by MIS. And in patients not desirous of fertility, obviously it could be abdominal type C1 radical hysterectomy and bilateral salpingectomy with bilateral pelvic lymphadenectomy plus or minus bilateral oophorectomy as considered, as we have already discussed. So, this was a paper in 2016 which was really a landmark paper, which showed that with LVSI negative simple trachelectomy or cone resection, the recurrence rates were quite low. This shows the oncological outcome if you are doing a cone, a simple trachelectomy or cone resection, and vaginal radical trachelectomy, which again showed that the recurrence rate. So, oncological outcomes are quite good with fertility sparing surgeries. So, coming to stage 1B2 and stage 2A1, if there is no role of fertility preservation in these cases, and standard treatment is abdominal type C1 radical hysterectomy and bilateral salpingectomy with bilateral pelvic lymphadenectomy plus or minus bilateral oophorectomy. So, NCCN 2023 shows that radiation can be an option for medically inoperable patients for those who refuse surgery. For high risk patients such as those who are 1A2 with LVSI, consideration can be given to adding concurrent platinum containing chemotherapy if you are choosing radiation instead of surgery. So, and I think we should not discuss 1B3 and 2A2, because that is again a very controversial issue. So, let us leave that here. And coming to how to choose, once you have done a surgery, how do you choose adjuvant treatment post surgery? We have to take all efforts again to see that we really do not give adjuvant therapy to all these women, but then still in spite, if you come across these cases, there is by chance you come across a positive or pelvic or para-aortic lymph node, she would need chemoradiation, parametrial spread or positive surgical margins. So, this has to would need adjuvant treatment, and patients with any high risk factors present in the radical hysterectomy specimen would need adjuvant concurrent chemoradiotherapy, and concurrent chemoradiotherapy is superior to radiation alone. And if we have intermediate risk factors, presence of LVSI, tumor diameter more than 4 centimeter at final pathology and deep cervical stromal invasion, again the same thing, if any two of these are positive, patients should receive adjuvant radiotherapy. But then we have a little modifications to this, which show that if you taking three things into consideration, LVSI, stromal invasion and tumor size, then the indications are a little different. So, this is a little beyond the Sedley's criteria. Then a little different is the neuroendocrine tumors of the uterine cervix. So they are different category together as compared to squamous, carcinomas and adenosquamous. Neuroendocrine tumors are rare entity, female genital tract, with cervix being the most common primary site. And this was one of our specimens which was done by laparoscopy. I think this was long before the LAC trial. So this was the histopathology was poorly differentiated carcinoma. So the point of mentioning this is that whenever you have a biopsy, your pathologist tells that it's a poorly differentiated carcinoma. I think it's very important to go back to your pathologist, discuss with them and try to confirm the diagnosis, because many times after the surgery has been done, it would come out as a neuroendocrine or some other very aggressive varieties. So these tumors account for 1.4% of all invasive cervical cancer. They are really very rare. And then again two varieties, low grade neuroendocrine, which are carcinoid or atypical carcinoid, and high grade neuroendocrine tumors. So all carcinoid, atypical carcinoid and large cell neuroendocrine carcinomas are usually P16 positive, while 79% of small cell carcinoma showed P16 positive staining. The possible relationship between cervical neuroendocrine carcinoma and HPV infection is very important finding, as these cancers may be prevented by HPV vaccine. That's a different story. And the most frequent used neuroendocrine stains are chromogranin A and synaptophysin CD56, but we'll just go to the treatment part of that. So the newly diagnosed high grade neuroendocrine cervical carcinomas, so of course physical examination has to be done, but if you have a biopsy of a neuroendocrine tumor, you can do a PET scan. If PET CT is not available, CT scan of the chest, abdomen and pelvis need to be done. So if it's really you are confirmed that it's early stage disease, then you can go ahead with surgery. So usually open radical hysterectomy with sentinel lymph node mapping may be done, or else chemoradiotherapy would be required if there is little advanced. So then after surgery, what you are going to do, because it has to be a nice communication with your pathologist, because if you do not do a proper examination of the specimen after your hysterectomy, then I think it all goes down the drain. So about the uterus, you should know the tumor site, the size, including the greatest dimension and additional 2 dimensions also, and the histologic type and the grade is important. So all this you have to ask from your pathologist. And about stromal invasion, that is depth of invasion in millimeter or in percentage, maybe they can give that also, and tumor width or extent in millimeters. And at the same time about the parametrium, vaginal cuff, fallopian tubes and the ovarian status, and surgical resection margin status. So this is very, very important. If it is negative, please ask about the closest margin and the distance to the closest margin. So that is also important, because if it is margin and it is, if it is negative but it is very close, then I think she would need some kind of adjuvant. And if positive, you need to know where is the location of the positive margin, so that you can tailor your adjuvant accordingly. And about the LVSI status, though it may not change your stage, but then it will give you some markers about the prognosis. So lymph nodes and others, you have to include the number of lymph nodes with isolated tumor cells, micrometastasis and macrometastasis. And at our center, we still give the lymph nodes differently, label them differently, so that we know which is the exact group of the node which is metastasis, so that we can plan a radiation accordingly. And isolated tumor cells also need to be documented. So NTR, if you have any status for doing all these advanced tests, it's also well and good, NTR gene fusions, HPV status, because if not now, you may need it a little later. So then coming to the de-escalation trends that are happening, less radical lymph node staging, less radical cervical or uterine procedures, fertility sparing treatment, minimally invasive approach and avoidance of combined treatment modalities. So de-escalation trends, less radical lymph node staging, because as you know, bilateral negative sentinel nodes accurately predict absence of lymph node metastasis in early cervical cancer. These were the results of the Sentinel study. So I think this concluded that it supported that the sentinel lymph node technique is a safe technique for use in patients, though it's we have to get it into our guidelines, but I think we have now enough evidence that sentinel lymph nodes can be done, but then you need to validate it very properly at your center. And this is again yet another study which also showed that. Yeah. So then coming to our Centix trial, so Centix trial was another study which showed that if these are all the studies which have validated that sentinel lymph nodes can be done, and usually you should search for sentinel nodes not beyond the division of the common iliac vessels, because most of the nodes are below the division of the common iliac vessels, and so very rarely you would get isolated sentinel lymph nodes in level 2 and above. And so the ESGO survey has shown that from 2017 to 2021, many of the gynae-oncology surgeons have really started doing sentinel lymph node, and so most of them have now shifted to sentinel lymph node. So I think we can also try validate your technique and start doing it. So de-escalation trends, less radical cervical and uterine procedures. So conservative management of early cervical cancer, is there a role for less radical surgery? I think we have many retrospective studies and many prospective studies also, which are really telling us that we can do less surgeries now. In squamous cell or adenocarcinomas, grade 1 or 2 histology with tumor size up to 2 centimeter with depth of invasion less than 10 mm, LVSA negative, node negative patients, conization or a simple hysterectomy plus or minus lymph node assessment is a valid option. And this is again the lesser trial which has also showed that simple hysterectomy is a promising substitute for modified radical hysterectomy in stage 1A2 to 1B1 cervical cancer less than or equal to 2 centimeters. So I think choosing your cases is also very, very important. And then we are all looking up to the SHAPE trial, in which maybe we will have enough evidence that we can do away with radical hysterectomy and do it a simple hysterectomy only in very 1A2, 1B1 and less smaller size tumors, but the results are yet to come. So then fertility sparing surgery for stage 1B has been the most validated for tumors less than 2 centimeter. For stage 1B2, lesions 2 to 4 centimeter abdominal approach is favored, and small neuroendocrine histology and gastric type adenocarcinoma are usually not considered suitable tumors, though they are small for this procedure, and because we have no data to support fertility sparing approach in small neuroendocrine tumors or gastric type adenocarcinoma or adenoma malignum. So similarly, there is yet another trial in which chemotherapy has been given, and this group has been divided into no response, complete response, partial response and suboptimal response. So if there is no response, they were off study. With suboptimal response, they were again off study, but those who had complete response have been taken up for simple trachelectomy and conization, and even those who had partial response were taken for simple trachelectomy and conization, and the adjuvant chemoradiation or radical hysterectomy was offered only to pathological risk factors. So de-escalation trends for minimally invasive approach, I think we had the very, very infamous LAC trial which showed that minimally invasive versus abdominal radical hysterectomy, there was a huge difference in the proportion of patients who had a progression-free survival as compared to radical abdominal hysterectomy against the laparoscopic surgery. So I think there has been a lot of criticism about this trial, but then till we have enough evidence, I think MIS has to be taken with a pinch of salt. And in this trial, minimally invasive radical hysterectomy was associated with lower rates of disease-free survival, overall survival than open abdominal radical hysterectomy. So we are all aware about that. And then to the SUCOR study, which is an international European cohort observational study, and in which minimally invasive surgery again in patients in FIGO 2009, of course stage 1B1 cervical cancer increased the risk of relapse and death. Patients underwent minimally invasive surgery using a uterine manipulator had a 2.76 times higher hazard of relapse, and avoiding uterine manipulator and implementing a protective vaginal closure was associated disease-free survival similar to that of a open surgery. So here you can see that the cumulative incidence of death was higher with MIS as compared to open, and similarly the cumulative incidence of relapse was also highest with MIS with uterine manipulator, was a little less with MIS without uterine manipulator, but was the least with open, and similarly with MIS without a protective colpotomy had a highest cumulative incidence of relapse. And of course the other one, the open and the one with protective colpotomy showed better or least cumulative incidence of relapse. So the Sukar cone study, again conization before radical hysterectomy, the various modifications are being done. So if we go stage 1B1 less than 4 centimeter, patient with prior cervical conization had a significantly lower risk of relapse and death, but then this is a really risky procedure because these are all Western literature. We need to have our own data in our centers. So patients who underwent minimally invasive surgery without conization had a higher chance of relapse, and patients with prior conization and minimally invasive surgery had similar outcomes compared with the open approach. So similarly, a robot assisted approach to cervical cancer, the results will be out in 2026, and we are really looking up to that. So avoidance of combined treatment modalities, the completion of radical hysterectomy does not improve survival of patients with cervical cancer, and intraoperatively detected lymph node involvement. So I think again patient selection is very, very important, that you have to take all the efforts to pick up cases which will really not need any kind of adjuvant treatment at the end of your surgery. So here the ABRAX result showed that the recurrence free survival, and you can see that in those who hysterectomy were completed and those in which it was abandoned, it was almost, the recurrence free survival was almost the same. So completion of radical hysterectomy does not improve survival in patients with intraoperatively detected lymph node involvement, regardless of the tumor size or histological type, because most of the time we are tempted that if I have opened, then I should go ahead and complete it, but it's not like that. And surgical treatment of intermediate risk lymph node negative cervical cancer patients without adjuvant radiotherapy. This was a retrospective cohort study and with review of literature, and cases were included that had negative pelvic lymph nodes, but a combination of tumor related negative prognostic risk factors, LVSI. So these had an excellent local control and could be achieved by radical surgery as a single modality in intermediate risk cervical cancer patients without lymph node involvement. So then coming to after surgery, how do you manage these cases? So I think follow up also is very, very important, and every 3 to 6 monthly for 2 years, I think that's the global standard, everyone does that, and every 6 to 12 months for 3 to 5 years, and then annually. Then coming to the utility of cytology following treatment is really controversial. It is not necessary. If she has come back to you after surgery and the vault looks absolutely clean, it's not necessary to do a cytology each time she comes. And then about the other tests, about imaging and lab tests are not routinely recommended as part of surveillance and can be indicated by clinical symptoms. If she has some symptoms like some pain or refer to the legs, so you can plan your imaging according to the clinical symptoms that she has. But the important thing that I would like to tell is that because we are discussing about surgery in cervical cancer, surgery can only happen in early stage disease, and early stage disease can only be picked up if we downstage them or we do a screening. So unfortunately, because of us losing out on doing speculum examinations, still more than 80% to 75% to 80% of the cases are still coming in advanced cases. So we learning radical hysterectomy but getting hardly few cases in a year is difficult. So I think it is still in our hands that if we start doing screening, pass this message to our gynecologist that if you start doing screening, then only we will get these cases in early stages. And so that's our moral responsibility. And I think again I have to stress that speculum examination has to be done, because for any reason that the patient is coming to the gynec clinic, once also during their antenatal checkup, it's not like not doing. So because I'll fail in my duty if I forget to mention that women going to IVF clinics usually are quite elderly, around 35, 40, and only recently one of a patient was referred to us in which the IVF cycle was cancelled because she had a growth in the vagina, and that was the second time. Because that means the first time she already had a growth, but that cycle she failed. So when she went back for the second time, there was a huge growth in the posterior vagina, and then she was referred to us. So I think a speculum examination is so important, and if we don't do that and discuss about big things, I think it's not going to fulfill anything. So thank you very much, and I invite all of you to AGOICON on November 24th to 26th at Bhubaneswar in Odisha, which is a very, very happening city. So on behalf of our executive members, past President-elect Dr. Rupinder and our President Dr. Amita, I invite all of you to this very, very nice conference. We have many international faculties and you will really enjoy the ambience of Bhubaneswar and our hospitality. So thank you very much for your kind attention.